In the gleaming boardroom of Hartwell Sports Marketing, a brilliant executive was about to face corporate betrayal at its cruelest. What started as celebrating the biggest deal in company history took a shocking turn when she came face to face with vindictive retaliation that would threaten everything she held dear. Jenkins Robinson wasn't your typical sports marketing executive. For 8 years, she had spent her life building authentic relationships with industry titans, known for her unwavering integrity and innovative deal-making, that had just secured a $1.9 billion NFL Super Bowl contract. When her CEO stripped her health insurance while her wife battled cancer, Jenkins had no idea she was walking into a battle that would expose an entire industry's toxic culture and forge an alliance with the most powerful organization in sports. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The champagne bubbles danced in the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the NFL headquarters boardroom. Jenkins Robinson sat at the polished mahogany table, her hands steady as she signed the final page of what would become the most lucrative Super Bowl contract in league history. $1.9 billion over 5 years. The magnitude of the moment wasn't lost on her. This deal would revolutionize sports marketing and cement her reputation as one of the industry's most innovative minds. Congratulations, Jenkins. Marcus Sullivan, the NFL's executive vice president of business operations, said as he shook her hand with genuine warmth. This partnership is going to change everything. Your vision for integrating digital media with traditional broadcasting is exactly what the league needs to reach the next generation of fans. The room erupted in applause from the assembled NFL executives and legal teams. Jenkins felt a surge of pride mixed with relief. 8 months of negotiations, countless late nights, and more coffee than any human should consume had led to this moment. At 34, she had just secured the kind of deal that most executives could only dream of landing in their entire career. The implementation timeline is aggressive but achievable, she replied, her voice carrying the confidence that had made her indispensable to clients and colleagues alike. We'll have the first phase of digital integration ready for the playoffs, and the full rollout will be live by next season's kickoff. Marcus nodded approvingly. That's why we chose Hartwell Sports Marketing. Well, that's why we chose you, specifically. Your track record speaks for itself. Jenkins had always been driven by more than just closing deals. Growing up as the daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, she understood the value of hard work and integrity. Business school at Northwestern had been funded through scholarships and student loans, but the education she'd received in persistence and ethical leadership had come from watching her mother navigate adversity with grace. This contract includes some unprecedented elements, Patricia Wong, the NFL's general counsel, noted as she reviewed the documents. The direct communication clauses between Robinson and league executives are unusual, but your collaborative approach throughout negotiations has earned our trust. Those clauses had been Jenkins' idea, a way to ensure that the massive partnership could be managed with the kind of personal attention that bureaucratic layers often prevented. It was a testament to the relationships she'd built that the NFL had agreed to such provision. As the formal ceremony concluded and the executives began to disperse, Jenkins stepped onto the balcony overlooking Manhattan. The city sprawled below her, twinkling with the promise of countless ambitions and dreams. She pulled out her phone to call her wife Sarah with the news, her heart swelling with anticipation of sharing this triumph with the person who had supported every step of her journey. "Sarah?" she said when the call connected, barely able to contain her excitement. "I did it. We got the contract, all $1.9 billion of it." But instead of the joyful response she expected, there was silence on the other end of the line. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was small and strained. "Jenkins, I need to tell you something. I'm at Dr. Peterson's office. The biopsy results came back today." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Jenkins gripped the balcony railing as Manhattan blurred through sudden tears. "What did they find?" "It's cancer, honey. Breast cancer. Stage 3. The words hit like physical blows. Jenkins sank into a nearby chair, the contract she'd just signed suddenly feeling like a meaningless piece of paper. Her greatest professional triumph had been instantly overshadowed by the fight of their lives. "How bad is it?" she managed to ask. Doc Peterson wants to start treatment immediately. Chemotherapy, surgery, the whole protocol. But Jenkins, the important thing is that we caught it, and we have options. We have insurance, we have savings, and we have each other. Jenkins closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Sarah had given up her nursing career 5 years earlier to support Jenkins' ambitions, believing that the sacrifice would pay off when the big opportunities came. Now, just as Jenkins had reached the pinnacle of her profession, Sarah needed her more than ever. "I'm coming home," Jenkins said. "Right now." "No. Finish your meetings. Celebrate this victory. We'll figure out the medical stuff together tonight." But Jenkins was already gathering her things. The NFL executives had been congratulating her just minutes earlier, but now their voices seemed to come from a different world. One where cancer diagnoses didn't arrive on the same day as career-defining achievements. Marcus Sullivan caught her arm as she headed for the elevator. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jenkins hesitated, then decided that the man who had just entrusted her with a $1.9 billion partnership deserved honesty. "My wife just called. She's been diagnosed with cancer." Marcus's expression immediately shifted from professional concern to personal compassion. "Jesus, Jenkins. I'm so sorry. Is there anything we can do? Maybe we could keep this between us for now. I need to process this with her first." "Of course." And Jenkins, "Take whatever time you need. Family comes first. Always. The contract will be here when you're ready." As the elevator descended toward the street, Jenkins reflected on the surreal nature of the day. In the span of 20 minutes, she had experienced the highest high and lowest low of her professional and personal life. The $9 billion contract that should have been her moment of triumph now felt like a bittersweet reminder that success meant nothing without the people you loved to share it with. The taxi ride back to their apartment in Brooklyn gave her time to think. Sarah's diagnosis would require the best medical care money could buy, and their comprehensive health insurance, through Hartwell Sports Marketing, would cover most of the cost. Jenkins had always been grateful for the benefits package, but now it represented something far more precious than a workplace perk. It was Sarah's lifeline. When she walked through their front door, Sarah was waiting with a brave smile and open arms. They held each other in the hallway, not speaking, just breathing together and drawing strength from their shared presence. "We're going to beat this," Jenkins whispered into Sarah's hair. "I know we are. And Jenkins, I'm proud of you. What you accomplished today is incredible, and cancer doesn't change that." As they sat together on their couch, surrounded by the life they'd built over 8 years of marriage, Jenkins realized that the real test wouldn't be managing $9 billion partnership. It would be navigating the challenge ahead, while maintaining the integrity and relationships that had brought her this far. She had no way of knowing that her greatest professional achievement would soon become the catalyst for a battle that would test not just her business acumen, but her courage, her relationships, and her fundamental beliefs about justice and loyalty. The contract in her briefcase represented more than money. It would become both a weapon and a shield in a fight she never saw coming. The golden handshake with the NFL was complete, but the real negotiation was just beginning. The champagne bubbles had barely settled in Jenkins' mind when she stepped through the glass doors of Hartwell Sports Marketing Group's 42nd floor offices. The familiar hum of keyboards and muted conversations should have felt like a homecoming after her triumph at NFL headquarters, but something was different. The usual energy that greeted her after successful client meetings was conspicuously absent. Bill Hartwell's voice cut through the office noise, but it lacked the enthusiasm Jenkins had expected. The CEO emerged from his corner office, his smile tight and practiced. "I heard we closed the Super Bowl deal. Excellent work by the team." The deliberate emphasis on team wasn't lost on Jenkins. She'd worked alone on this contract for 8 months, burning through weekends and late nights, crafting every detail of the proposal that had just secured the company's future. But she forced a smile, her mind still reeling from Sarah's devastating news. "Thank you, Bill. It's been a long road, but we got there." "We certainly did." Hartwell's pale blue eyes held a coldness that Jenkins had never noticed before. "I'm sure the NFL appreciated our collaborative approach. After all, Hartwell Sports Marketing has been building these relationships for decades. Jenkins felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach, the same feeling she'd had during her childhood when her father would diminish her achievements, always finding ways to claim credit or shift focus. She'd thought she'd left that dynamic behind in her professional life, but here it was again, dressed in expensive suits and corner offices. Of course, Jenkins replied carefully, the foundation you've built here made it possible. Hartwell's smile widened, seemingly satisfied with Jenkins' deference. Exactly. Now I'll need a full debrief on the contract terms, every clause, every contingency. We need to ensure everything aligns with our corporate strategy. As Hartwell walked away, Jenkins noticed the subtle shift in the office dynamics. Conversations quieted when she passed. Colleagues who usually sought her input on projects suddenly seemed busy with their screens. The poisonous atmosphere of corporate politics, something she'd somehow managed to avoid in her focused pursuit of excellence, now pressed against her like a suffocating fog. Ms. Robinson? Becca Thompson appeared at her elbow, her usual warm smile tinged with concern. She'd been Jenkins' assistant for 3 years, and in that time, she'd proven herself far more valuable than her title suggested. Sharp, intuitive, and fiercely loyal, she'd become her anchor in the increasingly treacherous waters of corporate life. Becca, thank God. Jenkins's composure cracked slightly. Could we talk privately? I need to discuss some scheduling changes. They retreated to her office, and Jenkins closed the door, something she rarely did. The weight of the morning pressed down on her as she sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted despite the early hour. Sarah has cancer, she said quietly, the words feeling foreign and terrible in her mouth. Stage 3 breast cancer. She called just as I was signing the contract. Becca's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes immediately filling with tears. Oh, Jenkins, I'm so sorry. What did the doctor say? We have an appointment with the oncologist tomorrow, but the initial prognosis, she swallowed hard, it's aggressive. She'll need immediate treatment, surgery, chemotherapy, probably radiation, the whole arsenal. Whatever you need, Becca said immediately. I'll clear your schedule, reschedule everything. Don't worry about anything here. Jenkins looked at her gratefully. Thank you. And Beck, I need you to be my eyes and ears around here. Something feels off about Hartwell's reaction to the contract. I've delivered the biggest deal in the company's history, and he's acting like I stole his lunch. Becca's expression darkened. You're not imagining. I've been watching the dynamics since you left for the NFL meeting. He's been in his office making calls, and I caught him on the phone with David Mitchell twice this morning. Long conversations, lots of whispering. The mention of David Mitchell, the head of HR, sent a chill through Jenkins. Mitchell was Hartwell's creature, a man who'd advanced through the company not on merit, but on his willingness to do whatever Hartwell required, no matter how ethically questionable. What could they possibly be discussing? Jenkins asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. I don't know, but I don't like it, Becca said. And there's something else. I overheard part of Hartwell's conversation with the NFL people after your meeting. He was asking a lot of questions about the contract terms, especially about any direct communication clauses. Jenkins felt her blood run cold. The contract did indeed contain such clauses, provisions that gave her direct access to NFL executives for the duration of the partnership. It was unprecedented, a testament to the trust she'd built with Marcus Sullivan and the other league officials. But in Hartwell's hands, that information could be weaponized. He's threatened by it, Jenkins realized aloud. He's threatened by the fact that I have a direct line to the NFL that doesn't go through him. That's exactly what I was thinking, Becca said. And you know how he handles threats. They both knew Hartwell's history. Over the years, talented executives who'd shone too brightly had found themselves marginalized, their projects reassigned, their budgets cut. Some had been forced out entirely through carefully orchestrated campaigns of professional sabotage. Jenkins had always believed her performance would protect her, but now she wondered if her excellence had actually painted a target on her back. A sharp knock interrupted their conversation. Come in, Jenkins called. Hartwell entered without waiting for permission, his eyes immediately noting the closed door and the intimate nature of their conversation. Am I interrupting something? Just discussing some schedule adjustments, Jenkins said smoothly. Sarah and I have some medical appointments coming up. Nothing serious, I hope. Hartwell's tone suggested he didn't particularly care about the answer. "We're handling it," Jenkins replied, unwilling to give her CEO any more ammunition than necessary. Hartwell's smile was razor thin. "Of course, family is important, though I hope these personal matters won't interfere with your dedication to the company. After all, we have a massive contract to manage now, and the NFL will be watching our every move." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Jenkins felt her jaw tight. "My dedication to this company has never been in question, hasn't it?" Hartwell's voice took on a dangerously soft quality. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you've been building relationships that bypass the company structure entirely. The NFL executives seem quite taken with you personally." "I've been building relationships that benefit this company," Jenkins replied, her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest. "See, that's where we might have a problem," Hartwell said, settling into the chair across from Jenkins' desk uninvited. "Because loyalty to this company means loyalty to its leadership structure. It means understanding that all relationships flow through appropriate channels. It means not forgetting who signs the paychecks." The office fell silent except for the distant hum of the air conditioning. Jenkins could feel Becca's tension beside her, could see the way her hands clenched in her lap. The moment stretched between them, pregnant with implications and unspoken threats. "I understand perfectly," Jenkins said finally. "The question is whether you understand the value of what I've brought to this company." Hartwell's smile vanished entirely. "Oh, I understand value, Jenkins. I also understand that value can be reassessed. Market conditions change, priorities shift. Sometimes what seems valuable one day becomes expendable the next." With that, he stood and walked to the door, pausing only to add, "I'll expect that full contract debrief by end of business today. Every clause, every contingency. I want to understand exactly what commitments you've made on behalf of this company." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the suddenly oppressive silence. "Jesus Christ," Becca whispered. "He's planning something. You can't give him ammunition, Jenkins. Whatever's in that contract that gives you direct access to the NFL, he'll find a way to use it against me," Jenkins finished. "The question is what he's planning to do about it." As if summoned by their conversation, they could hear Hartwell's voice through the thin walls, speaking in low, urgent tones to someone, probably Mitch. The conversation was too muffled to make out individual words, but the tone was unmistakable, conspiratorial, determined, and filled with malicious intent. Jenkins stared out her office window at the city skyline, her mind racing. In the span of a single morning, she'd achieved the greatest professional triumph of her career, and learned that her wife was fighting for her life. Now it seemed, she was about to discover that her professional environment was more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent years building her reputation on integrity and excellence, believing that good work would speak for itself, but in Bill Hartwell's world, excellence wasn't rewarded, it was punished, especially when it threatened the existing power structure. As she watched Hartwell pace in his office, gesticulating animatedly to someone on the phone, Jenkins realized that her greatest professional achievement might also be her downfall. The contract that should have secured their future had instead made her a target, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a terrible thought began to form. If Hartwell was willing to undermine her professionally, what other weapons might he be willing to use? What other vulnerabilities might he exploit? The answer, Jenkins would soon discover, was more devastating than she could have imagined. The whispered conversation in Hartwell's office had continued for another hour before Jenkins finally left the building that evening, her mind churning with dread. 24 hours later, she sat in Dr. Elizabeth Chen's sterile oncology office, holding Sarah's trembling hand as their world shifted on its axis once again. "The imaging confirms our initial assessment," Dr. Chen said, her voice gentle but clinical. "Stage 3 invasive ductal carcinoma. The tumor is larger than we initially thought, about 4 centimeters, and we've detected involvement in several lymph nodes." Sarah's grip tightened on Jenkins' hand, but her voice remained steady. "What does that mean for treatment?" "Aggressive intervention," Dr. replied, pulling up scans on her computer monitor. "We'll start with neoadjuvant chemotherapy to shrink the tumor, followed by surgery, likely a modified radical mastectomy, then additional chemotherapy and radiation. The entire protocol will take approximately 8 to 10 months. Jenkins felt the blood drain from her face as the doctor continued outlining the treatment plan. Each word carried a price tag that echoed in her mind. Chemotherapy sessions at $12,000 each, surgical procedures ranging from $30,000 to $50,000, radiation treatments, follow-up care, potential complications. What about prognosis? Sarah asked, her nursing background allowing her to ask the questions Jenkins couldn't voice. With aggressive treatment, the 5-year survival rate for stage 3 breast cancer is approximately 72%, Dr. Chen said. But Sarah, you're young, otherwise healthy, and we're catching this relatively early in its progression. I'm optimistic about your response to treatment, relatively early. The phrase haunted Jenkins as they left the appointment 2 hours later, armed with a treatment schedule, financial estimates, and a thick folder of information about navigating cancer care. The total cost, even with insurance, would easily reach their comprehensive health coverage through Hartwell Sports Marketing would cover 90%, leaving them with a manageable though substantial copay. We can do this, Sarah said as they sat in their car in the hospital parking lot. The insurance will cover most of it, and we have our savings. We'll be okay, Jenkins nodded, but something cold was settling in her stomach. Hartwell's words from the previous day echoed in her mind. Value can be reassessed. Sometimes what seems valuable one day becomes expendable the next. Meanwhile, 15 floors above the city in Hartwell's corner office, a very different conversation was taking place. The board meeting is next week, Hartwell said, pacing behind his desk as David Mitchell sat rigid in the leather chair across from him. We need to present the cost-cutting measures as a company-wide initiative, not targeted actions. Mitchell adjusted his glasses nervously. I've prepared the documentation, restructuring due to market conditions, eliminating redundant positions, streamlining benefits packages. It all looks very legitimate. On Robinson's position, her role will be reclassified as consultant status rather than full employee. Consultants don't receive health benefits, pension contributions, or stock options. It's a standard cost-saving measure that affects several departments. Hartwell's smile was predatory. Genius. She keeps her salary but loses everything that makes the position valuable. And the timing. The board meets Thursday. If approved, the changes take effect the following Monday. Robinson's insurance coverage would be terminated that day. Perfect. Hartwell stopped pacing and stared out his window at the city below. She thinks she's untouchable because of her NFL connections. Time to remind her who really holds the power here. Mitchell shifted uncomfortably.
Bill, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Robinson did deliver the biggest contract in company history. The optics of cutting her benefits right after such a major win might raise questions. Hartwell's expression darkened. The optics I'm concerned about are a subordinate who thinks she can bypass company hierarchy and build personal relationships with our biggest clients. The NFL executives are treating her like she's running this company. David. That's unacceptable. But the contract language gives her direct access. The contract language was negotiated without proper oversight. Hartwell snapped. Another reason why her methods are problematic. We need to establish clear boundaries about who speaks for this company, and how client relationships are managed. Mitchell nodded weakly, though doubt clouded his features. He'd been with the company long enough to remember other talented executives who'd crossed Hartwell and found themselves systematically dismantled. The pattern was always the same: identify a vulnerability, create bureaucratic justification, and strike when the target was most exposed. I'll need the board documentation by Wednesday, Hartwell continued. Make sure everything is bulletproof. No holes, no questions about legitimacy. This needs to look like prudent business management, not personal retaliation. Understood. Mitchell gathered his papers, pausing at the door. What if Robinson fights this? She's got connections now, resources we might not have anticipated. Hartwell's laugh was cold. She's got a wife with cancer, David. She'll be too busy dealing with medical bills and treatment schedules to cause problems. Sometimes life provides its own leverage. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The door closed, leaving Hartwell alone with his plan. He pulled out the copy of Jenkins' contract he'd obtained from legal, studying the clauses that had been eating at him for days. The direct access provisions were unprecedented, giving Jenkins a communication channel that bypassed all normal corporate hierarchy. It was exactly the kind of relationship building that had made Jenkins so valuable and so dangerous. But value could be weaponized. The same personal circumstances that made Jenkins desperate to keep her insurance would make her compliant. She'd accept the reclassification rather than risk losing her income entirely. And once her benefits were gone, her options would be severely limited. Hartwell opened his laptop and began drafting the board presentation. The narrative was simple. Market pressures required strategic cost reductions, and converting high-paid executives to consultant status was a proven method for maintaining talent while reducing overhead. The fact that it would destroy Jenkins' security was merely a fortunate coincidence. 20 minutes later, Jenkins sat in their kitchen, surrounded by medical paperwork and insurance documentation. Sarah was upstairs resting, exhausted by the emotional weight of the day. The treatment schedule Dr. Sten had provided was daunting: chemotherapy starting in 2 weeks, surgery tentatively scheduled for 4 months out, followed by additional treatment, extending into the following year. She pulled out a calculator and began running numbers. With their current insurance, the out-of-pocket maximum was $15,000 annually, substantial but manageable with their savings and her salary. The drug copays would add another $3,000, and there would be incidental costs, transportation, time off work, additional care, but they could weather it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Becca. Board meeting, scheduled for Thursday. Emergency session. Mitchell's been working late every night this week. Something big is coming. Jenkins stared at the message, that cold feeling in her stomach intensifying. Board meetings weren't called without significant business to discuss, and Mitchell's involvement suggested personnel matters. The timing, just days after her confrontation with Hartwell, couldn't be coincidental. She looked at the medical bills spread across the table, then at the insurance cards they'd need to present at every appointment. For the first time since joining Hartwell Sports Marketing, Jenkins began to understand how precarious her position really was. Her success had made her valuable, but it had also made her vulnerable. Upstairs, Sarah was already asleep, her face peaceful despite the storm they were facing. Jenkins watched her for a long moment, noting the small signs of stress that even sleep couldn't erase. She'd been Jenkins' anchor through every challenge they'd faced, from her struggles in business school to the long nights building her career. Now she needed Jenkins to be her anchor, and Jenkins was beginning to realize that everything they'd built together might be under attack. The irony was devastating. The contract that should have secured their future, the achievement that represented the pinnacle of her career, had instead painted a target on her back, just when her family needed security most. And somewhere in the corporate machinery of Hartwell Sports Marketing, forces were already in motion to exploit that vulnerability in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The trap was being set, and Jenkins didn't even know she was the prey. 3 days later, on a gray Friday morning that would forever divide her life into before and after, the hammer fell. David Mitchell appeared at Jenkins' office door at 9:15 a.m., carrying a manila folder and wearing the expression of a man about to perform an execution. Behind him stood a security guard Jenkins didn't recognize, a subtle but unmistakable message. "Jenkins, we need to discuss some changes to your employment status," Mitchell said, his voice artificially steady. "Conference room 3, please." The walk down the hallway felt like a death march. Jenkins could feel eyes following her, colleagues, suddenly finding urgent reasons to look busy. Becca's worried glance from her desk was the last human connection she saw before Mitchell closed the conference room door. "Please, sit down," Mitchell said, though he remained standing. The folder hit the table with a sound like a gavel. "As you know, the company has been conducting a comprehensive review of our organizational structure in response to evolving market conditions." Jenkins felt her stomach plummet. The corporate doublespeak was beginning, the careful language designed to obscure what was really happening. "What kind of review?" "The board has approved a restructuring initiative to optimize our operational efficiency." Mitchell continued, reading from a prepared script. Several positions are being reclassified to better align with industry standards and fiscal responsibility. Cut to the chase, David. What's happening to my position? Mitchell's Adam's apple bobbed nervously. Effective immediately, your role is being reclassified from senior vice president to senior consultant. Your compensation package will be adjusted accordingly. The words hit like physical blows. Jenkins knew exactly what this meant. Consultants didn't receive benefits. No health insurance, no pension contributions, no stock options, just a base salary and the privilege of continuing to work for the company that was destroying her life. You're stripping my benefits, Jenkins said quietly. Sarah starts chemotherapy next week. This is a company-wide initiative, Mitchell replied, not meeting her eyes. The decision affects multiple departments and was made purely on operational grounds. Bullshit. Jenkins' voice was deadly calm. Show me the list of other people being reclassified. Mitchell's hands trembled slightly as he shuffled through the folder. I can't discuss other employees' personnel matters. Because there aren't any others. Are there? Jenkins leaned forward. This is targeted retaliation and you know it. Robinson. I need to caution you about making inflammatory accusations. The decision has been made by the board based on legitimate business considerations. Your consultant agreement maintains your current salary and provides flexibility that many employees would welcome. Jenkins laughed bitterly. Flexibility? Right. The flexibility to watch my wife die because we can't afford her treatment. Mitchell flinched but pressed on. The transition takes effect Monday. Your current insurance coverage will terminate at midnight Sunday. We recommend you explore COBRA continuation coverage or marketplace alternatives. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent light. Jenkins stared at the papers Mitchell had spread across the table. Legal documents that represented the systematic destruction of her family's security. The timing was surgical in its precision. Sarah's first chemotherapy session was scheduled for Tuesday. How much did Hartwell offer you for your soul, David? That's enough. Mitchell's composure cracked slightly. You can review the documentation and provide your response by end of business today. If you choose not to accept the consultant position, we'll consider that your resignation. And if I fight this? Fight what? A legitimate business restructuring approved by the board and documented according to all legal requirements. Mitchell's confidence was returning now that he was back on script. I'd advise against that course of action. The threat was clear. Accept the demotion or lose everything. Jenkins realized with crystal clarity that this had been planned down to the smallest detail. The board meeting. The documentation. The timing, everything designed to force her compliance at the moment of maximum vulnerability. She thought of Sarah, probably at home preparing for her first treatment, trusting that their insurance would cover the costs. The chemotherapy alone would cost $60,000 without coverage. The surgery, radiation, follow-up care. It would bankrupt them within months. I need to think about this, Jenkins said finally. Of course, but I'll need your decision today. Mitchell began gathering the papers. Owen Jenkins, Mr. Hartwell wanted me to remind you that consultant status comes with certain limitations on external communication. All client contact will need to be pre-approved through proper channels. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Not only were they stripping her benefits, they were severing her direct connection to the NFL executives who respected her. Hartwell wasn't just punishing her. He was neutralizing her completely. After Mitchell left, Jenkins sat alone in the conference room, staring at the consultant agreement. The language was dense and technical, but the meaning was brutal. Accept second-class status, or lose everything. There was no option that preserved both her family's health care and her professional integrity. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, feeling nervous about Tuesday but ready to fight this thing. Love you. Jenkins closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. If she refused the consultant position, they'd have no income and no insurance. If she accepted it, they'd have income but no insurance, and she'd be professionally castrated. Either way, Sarah's treatment would be in jeopardy. Another text, this one from Becca, saw Mitchell leave. Are you okay? Whatever they did, we'll figure it out. At least she wasn't completely alone. But as she sat in that sterile conference room, surrounded by the legal machinery of her destruction, Jenkins felt more isolated than ever. The company she'd served loyally for 8 years had just declared war on her family, and they'd chosen their moment perfectly. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to Marcus Sullivan's number. The NFL executive had given her his direct line, saying to call if she ever needed anything. At the time, it had seemed like professional courtesy. Now it might be her only lifeline. But first, she had to go home and tell Sarah that their insurance was disappearing in 3 days. Just as her fight for life was about to begin, she had to explain that her greatest professional achievement had somehow transformed into their worst nightmare. As she walked back to her office to collect her things, Jenkins noticed the subtle changes in how people looked at her. Word was already spreading through the corporate grapevine. She was no longer the company's star who'd landed the biggest deal in their history. She was damaged goods, a cautionary tale about what happened when you flew too close to the sun. Hartwell's door was closed, but Jenkins could see him through the glass on the phone, gesturing animatedly, probably already celebrating his victory. The sight filled Jenkins with a cold rage that surprised her with its intensity. This wasn't over. Hartwell might think he'd won, but he'd made one crucial miscalculation. In his arrogance and petty vindictiveness, he'd just declared war on a woman with nothing left to lose and connections he didn't fully understand. The contract that had made Jenkins a target might also be her salvation. The NFL executives who'd praised her integrity wouldn't appreciate learning how their business partner treated the architect of their biggest deal. But first, Sarah. Everything else could wait until she'd held her wife and promised her that somehow, some way, they'd find a path through this nightmare. The real fight was just beginning. That evening, Jenkins sat in her home office, staring at Marcus Sullivan's contact information on her phone. The weight of the day pressed down on her like a physical force. The humiliation of the morning meeting, the impossible choice between her dignity and her family's survival, and worst of all, the conversation she'd just had with Sarah. She'd taken the news with her characteristic grace, but Jenkins had seen the fear flash across her face when she explained that their insurance would disappear in 3 days. "We'll figure it out," she'd said, holding Jenkins' hand across their kitchen table. "Cobra coverage will bridge us until you find something else." But they both knew the math. Cobra would cost $2,400 per month for inferior coverage with higher deductibles. Combined with Sarah's treatment costs, it would drain their savings within 6 months. The consultant salary Hartwell was offering would barely cover their mortgage, let alone cancer treatment. Jenkins had spent 8 years believing that excellence and integrity would protect her. Now she understood how naive that belief had been. In Bill Hartwell's world, those qualities made you a target, not a treasured asset. With trembling fingers, she dialed Marcus Sullivan's direct line. "Jenkins," Marcus's voice was warm and immediate. "How's the post-contract celebration going? I hope Hartwell is treating you like the hero you are." The irony was so bitter that Jenkins almost laughed. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I apologize in advance for how this is going to sound." "Shoot, what's on your mind?" Jenkins took a deep breath. If a company retaliated against an employee for the relationship she built while negotiating an NFL contract, would the league have any concerns about that? The silence on the other end stretched for several heartbeats. When Marcus spoke again, his tone had shifted completely. "Jenkins, what the hell is going on? My wife was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer this week. Today, Hartwell stripped my health insurance benefits and demoted me to consultant status. The insurance terminates Sunday. Sarah starts chemotherapy Tuesday." "Jesus Christ." Marcus's voice carried a fury that surprised Jenkins. "Tell me everything, right now." For the next 20 minutes, Jenkins laid out the entire story. Sarah's diagnosis, Hartwell's cold reception of the contract news, the systematic undermining, and finally the devastating blow delivered that morning. Marcus listened without interruption, but Jenkins could hear the anger building in his silence. "That vindictive piece of shit," Marcus finally exploded. "Jenkins, You delivered the most innovative partnership proposal in NFL history. You personally secured us a $9 billion deal that's going to revolutionize sports marketing, and he's punishing you for it? He sees my relationship with you as a threat to his authority. Good. It should be. Marcus paused, and Jenkins could hear papers shuffling. Jenkins, I need you to understand something. This isn't just personal for me, though. I'm furious about how they're treating you. This is business, bad business. What do you mean? The NFL doesn't just hand out $9 billion contracts to companies we don't trust completely. Part of our due diligence on Hartwell Sports Marketing included evaluating their corporate culture and employee treatment. We specifically flagged concerns about Hartwell's leadership style during our preliminary reviews. Jenkins felt her pulse quicken. What kind of concern? Turnover rates, employee satisfaction surveys, some whispers about retaliation against high performers, nothing concrete enough to disqualify them, but enough to make us nervous. The fact that they had you, someone with your reputation for integrity, gave us confidence that the company had evolved. And now they've just proven our initial instincts were right. Marcus's voice was granite hard. Jenkins, the partnership agreement you negotiated doesn't just cover marketing services, it includes specific clauses about corporate ethics and business practices. Section 12A requires all partners to maintain workplace standards consistent with NFL values. Jenkins's heart began to race. I remember that section, but I thought it was just boilerplate language. Nothing in a $1.9 billion contract is boilerplate. We included those clauses specifically because we've been burned before by partners who looked good on paper but had toxic internal culture. It reflects poorly on the NFL when our business partners mistreat their employees, especially the employees who deliver for us. So what does that mean? It means, Marcus said slowly, that retaliating against the architect of our biggest partnership deal might constitute a material breach of contract, and it definitely violates the spirit of our working relationship. Jenkins could barely breathe. Are you saying? I'm saying that Hartwell just picked a fight with the wrong organization. The NFL doesn't forget its friends, and we don't tolerate partners who abuse the people who make us money. Marcus paused. I need to make some calls. Can you be available tomorrow morning? Of course, but Marcus, I don't want to cause problems. Problems? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jenkins, the problems already exist. Hartwell created them when he decided to punish excellence instead of rewarding it. We're just going to make sure he understands the consequences of his choices. After hanging up, Jenkins sat in stunned silence. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt something other than despair. Marcus Sullivan wasn't just offering sympathy, he was offering to fight. And the NFL, Jenkins was beginning to understand, had weapons that Hartwell hadn't considered. Her phone rang again. Jenkins, it was Becca calling from her personal cell. I'm at home, but I wanted to update you. Hartwell's been making calls all afternoon. Bragging call. He's telling people he put you in your place and reminded everyone who runs this company. Idiot. Jenkins muttered. There's more. I overheard him talking to someone, maybe a board member, about how the NFL executives got too comfortable with you and needed to understand that all communication goes through proper channels now. Jenkins felt a cold smile cross her face. He has no idea what he's just triggered. What do you mean? I just talked to Marcus Sullivan. The NFL is interested in Hartwell's personnel decisions. Really? Becca's voice brightened for the first time in days. What kind of interested? The kind that might make him regret every decision he's made this week. Jenkins looked at Sarah's medical files spread across her desk. Becca, I need you to document everything, every conversation you've overheard, every piece of evidence that this was targeted retaliation. Can you do that, without compromising yourself? Already start. I've been taking notes all week. Her voice hardened. This is wrong, Jenkins. What he did to you is wrong, and someone needs to hold him accountable. After they hung up, Jenkins walked upstairs to check on Sarah. She was sleeping peacefully, but Jenkins could see the stress lines around her eyes even in rest. Tomorrow, she would tell her that help was coming. Tonight, she would let her sleep without knowing that their battle was about to escalate far beyond anything Hartwell had anticipated. In his arrogance, Hartwell had made a classic mistake, He'd assumed that destroying Jenkins would be consequence-free. He'd counted on desperation to keep his victim compliant and isolated, but he'd overlooked the most important factor in the equation. Jenkins hadn't just negotiated a contract with the NFL. She'd built relationships based on mutual respect and shared values, and the NFL, as Marcus had made clear, protected its own. The David and Goliath story was about to get very interesting, especially since David had just discovered she wasn't fighting alone.
The giant was about to learn that some stones, when thrown with enough force and righteous anger, could bring down even the most arrogant adversary. Monday morning would bring new revelations, new allies, and the beginning of Bill Hartwell's very bad week. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and he didn't even know it yet. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, Jenkins sat in a small conference room at her friend Tom Richardson's law firm, surrounded by legal pads, printed emails, and a growing sense that the tide was turning. Tom had been her roommate at business school, and their friendship had deepened over the years as Tom built his reputation as one of the city's most feared employment attorneys. "This is textbook retaliation," Tom said, reviewing the consultant agreement for the third time. "The timing alone is damning, stripping benefits immediately after your wife's cancer diagnosis, and just days after you delivered their biggest contract ever." Jenkins' phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Sullivan. Conference call at 9 a.m., bringing NFL legal team and business operations. "This is happening." Marcus wasn't kidding about mobilizing resources, Jenkins told Tom, showing him the message. "I've never seen him this angry." "Good. Righteous anger is a powerful weapon when it's backed by $1.9 billion in leverage." Tom leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about this Becca Thompson. You trust her completely. With my life, she's been documenting everything since this started." As if summoned, Jenkins' phone rang. "Ms. Robinson. It's Becca. I'm calling from my car before I go into the office. I need to tell you what I found." "Put her on speaker," Tom instructed. "Becca, I'm here with my attorney, Tom Richardson. What did you discover?" "I stayed late Friday night and did some digging." Her voice was tight with excitement and fear. "Jenkins, this isn't the first time. I found evidence of at least 3 other executives who were pushed out after achieving major wins. Same pattern: success followed by manufactured reasons for termination or demotion." Tom leaned forward. "What kind of evidence?" "HR files. I probably shouldn't have access to, but Mitchell left his computer unlocked when he went home Friday. Email chains between Hartwell and board members, performance reviews that were mysteriously changed after the fact, documentation of trumped-up disciplinary action." "Jesus," Jenkins breathed. "He's done this before. Multiple times. There's a name for it in the emails. They call it talent management. But what they really mean is eliminating anyone who threatens Hartwell's ego." Becca paused. I found the real board minutes from Thursday's meeting. Mitchell lied to you about it being a company-wide initiative. Your reclassification was the only personnel action discussed." Tom was taking rapid notes. "Becca, this is incredibly valuable. But you need to be careful. If they discover what you've accessed, I know the risks. But what they did to Jenkins is wrong, and I'm tired of watching good people get destroyed by that narcissistic bully." At 9:00 a.m., precisely, Jenkins and Tom dialed into the conference call. Marcus Sullivan's voice came through the speaker with military precision, introducing a team that sounded like a corporate SWAT unit: NFL General Counsel Patricia Wong, Business Operations VP James Carter, and Contract Compliance Director Sarah Mitchell. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, "we've spent the weekend reviewing the Hartwell Sports Marketing Partnership Agreement and conducting our own investigation into the company's recent personnel decisions. What we've found is concerning." Patricia Wong took over. "Ms. Robinson, the partnership agreement you negotiated contains specific provisions requiring ethical business practices and employee treatment standards. Section 12A includes language about maintaining workplace cultures consistent with NFL values. We've also reviewed Hartwell's public statements about corporate responsibility," James Carter added. "The disconnect between their marketing messaging
and actual practices creates potential liability issues for the NFL. Jenkins felt her pulse accelerate. What kind of liability? Reputational risk, Sarah Mitchell explained. When our partner mistreats the employee who delivered our biggest deal, it reflects poorly on NFL judgment and due diligence. We can't afford to be associated with companies that punish excellence. Marcus's voice hard. Here's what's going to happen. We're scheduling an emergency partnership review meeting for Wednesday. Hartwell and his senior team will be required to attend and explain their recent personnel decisions. Will that actually accomplish anything? Tom asked. Oh, it'll accomplish quite a lot, Patricia Wong replied. The partnership agreement includes termination clauses for material breaches of ethical standards. We're prepared to use them. But first, Marcus continued, we want to give them an opportunity to correct their mistake. Sometimes people make better decisions when they understand the full consequences of their actions. After the call ended, Jenkins sat in stunned silence. In less than 72 hours, she'd gone from isolated victim to the center of a corporate war backed by one of the most powerful organizations in sports. They're not messing around, Tom said admiringly. The NFL doesn't make empty threats. Hartwell's about to discover that his small-minded revenge has very large consequences. Jenkins' phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Robinson? This is Jennifer Walsh from Sports Business Journal. I'm investigating reports of unusual personnel changes at Hartwell Sports Marketing following their recent NFL contract win. Would you be available for comment? Jenkins looked at Tom, who nodded grimly. How did you hear about this? Let's just say certain parties are concerned about corporate practices in the sports marketing industry. The timing of your status change, particularly given your wife's medical situation, has raised some eyebrows among people who value ethical business conduct. After arranging to speak with the journalist later, Jenkins realized the full scope of what Marcus had set in motion. This wasn't just about NFL pressure, it was about public accountability, industry reputation, and the kind of scrutiny that destroyed careers in companies. Marcus is playing chess while Hartwell's playing checkers, Tom observed. Legal pressure, media attention, industry consequences. He's attacking from every possible angle. That afternoon, Becca called with an update that sent chills through Jenkins. Hartwell's in full panic mode. He's been on the phone with lawyers all morning, and I heard him screaming at Mitchell about exposure and liability. Word is getting around the office about the NFL meeting Wednesday. How are the other executives reacting? Like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Nobody wants to be associated with this anymore. Some of the board members have been making calls, asking questions about the decision-making process. By evening, Jenkins sat with Sarah as she prepared for her first chemotherapy session the next. The Cobra paperwork was complete, ensuring her treatment could proceed, but the financial strain was crushing. Still, for the first time in days, she felt something approaching optimism. You look different, Sarah observed, studying her face. Less defeated. I think we're going to be okay, Jenkins said carefully. More than okay, actually. Hartwell made a mistake when he decided to pick this fight. What kind of mistake? Jenkins smiled, thinking of Marcus Sullivan's fury. The NFL's mobilizing resources, and the journalist's probing question. He forgot that some people still believe in doing the right thing, and some of those people have the power to make his life very uncomfortable. Sarah squeezed her hand. Good, because tomorrow I start fighting for my life, and I'd like to know you're fighting for yours too. Oh, I am, Jenkins assured her, and I'm not fighting alone anymore. Outside their window, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing dreams and ambitions, and the eternal human struggle between right and wrong. Tomorrow would bring Sarah's first treatment, and the beginning of Hartwell's reckoning. The case was built, the allies were mobilized, and justice was preparing to make its move. The only question now was whether Bill Hartwell would realize the magnitude of his error before it was too late to salvage anything from the wreckage of his arrogance. Wednesday morning arrived like Judgment Day. Jenkins sat in the NFL's Manhattan headquarters boardroom, the same room where she'd celebrated her triumph just 2 weeks earlier. But now the atmosphere crackled with tension instead of champagne toast. Sarah's first chemotherapy session had gone well the day before, and knowing she was fighting for her life gave Jenkins a clarity of purpose that felt almost supernatural. Marcus Sullivan entered at exactly 10:00 a.m., flanked by Patricia Wong and James Carter. Their expressions were granite hard, and Jenkins noticed that Patricia carried a thick folder that seemed to radiate legal menace. "Before Hartwell arrives," Marcus said, settling into his chair, "I want you to understand what's about to happen. This isn't a negotiation, it's a reckoning. They have exactly one chance to make this right, and if they choose poorly, the consequences will be swift and devastating." At 10:15, Bill Hartwell swept into the room with David Mitchell trailing behind like a nervous shadow. Hartwell's usual swagger was intact, but Jenkins noticed the slight tremor in his hands, and the way his eyes darted around the room, assessing the power dynamics he clearly didn't understand. "Marcus," Hartwell's voice boomed with false confidence, "I hope this emergency meeting means you're ready to discuss expanding our partnership. The Super Bowl contract is just the beginning of what we can accomplish together." Marcus didn't stand or offer his hand. "Sit down, Bill. We need to talk about your recent personnel decision." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hartwell's smile faltered as he took his seat, Mitchell sliding into the chair beside him like a man approaching the gallows. "I'm not sure what you mean," Hartwell said carefully. "We've made some strategic adjustments to optimize our organizational structure, but nothing that should concern. You stripped health insurance benefits from the woman who delivered our $1 billion contract," Patricia Wong interrupted, her voice cutting through Hartwell's corporate speak like a scalpel. "You did this while her wife is battling cancer and just days after she secured the biggest deal in your company's history. Are you going to sit there and pretend this was routine business?" Mitchell visibly paled, but Hartwell's jaw tightened. "Our internal personnel decisions are confidential company matter. With all due respect, the NFL doesn't have standing to Section 12A of the partnership agreement," James Carter said, sliding a document across the table. "Corporate Ethics and Workplace Standards Clause. You signed it, Bill. You're bound by it." Hartwell glanced at the contract language, and Jenkins saw the exact moment realization hit him. His face went ashen as he understood that his revenge had legal consequences he'd never anticipated. "This is ridiculous," Hartwell blustered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Jenkins Robinson is a valued employee who was offered a consultant position with maintained salary. The decision was made for legitimate business reasons." "What legitimate business reasons?" Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. "Please explain the business logic of punishing the architect of your biggest success." The direct communication clauses in the contract circumvent proper corporate hierarchy. "We needed to establish clear boundaries about client relationships. You needed to punish her for building relationships that made you feel insecure," Patricia Wong said flatly. "We've reviewed your company's history, Bill. This is a pattern with you." She opened her folder and spread out documents like playing cards. "Richard Martinez, VP of Client Development, forced out 6 months after landing the Coca-Cola sponsorship deal. Amanda Foster, Senior Marketing Director, terminated 3 weeks after securing the Olympic partnership. Thomas Kim, Account Executive, demoted after the Nike contract renewal." Each name hit like a sledgehammer. Mitchell was openly sweating now, and Hartwell's composure was cracking like ice in spring. These were all legitimate personnel actions, based on performance, and based on your inability to tolerate excellence that threatens your fragile ego," Marcus said, standing up. The movement was deliberate, powerful, and it commanded the room's attention. "Here's what's going to happen. You have 24 hours to restore Jenkins Robinson to her full position with all benefits retroactively reinstated. You will publicly acknowledge that the demotion was an error in judgment, and provide written assurance that no retaliation will occur, and if we refuse—" Hartwell's voice was barely a whisper, Then we terminate the partnership for material breach of ethical standards, Patricia Wong replied. The termination clause allows for immediate contract cancellation with no compensation to Hartwell Sports Marketing. You'll lose $9 billion contract and face legal action for damages. You can't be serious. You'd destroy our entire company over one personnel decision. We'd destroy your company to preserve our integrity, James Carter said cold. The NFL's reputation depends on our partners maintaining ethical standards. You've proven you can't meet those standards. The room fell silent except for the sound of Mitchell's labored breathing. Jenkins watched Hartwell's face cycle through emotions: disbelief, rage, fear, and finally something approaching panic. There's more, Marcus continued, returning to his seat. We've spoken with other industry partners. Word is spreading about your business practice. The Olympic Committee has questions about their partnership. Coca-Cola is reviewing their relationship. Your reputation is becoming toxic, Bill. This is extortion, Hartwell said desperately. This is consequence, Patricia Wong corrected. You declared war on excellence and integrity. We're simply showing you what happens when you lose that war. Jenkins had remained silent throughout the confrontation, but now she felt compelled to speak. Bill, you could have celebrated our success together. The contract opens doors for both of us. Instead, you chose to see my achievement as a threat. I don't need lectures from an employee who forgot her place, Hartwell snapped, his mask finally slipping completely. There it is, Marcus said, with satisfaction. The real Bill Hartwell. This isn't about business hierarchy or communication protocols. This is about a petty, insecure man who punishes people for succeeding. David Mitchell suddenly stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this anymore. His voice was shaking. Bill, they're right. What we did was wrong. Jenkins earned her success and we targeted her because you felt threatened. Shut up, David. No, Mitchell turned to face the NFL executives. I have documentation of everything. The real board minutes, the emails about talent management, the systematic targeting of high performers. I'm prepared to provide full cooperation in any investigation. Hartwell stared at his HR director in shocked betrayal. You're fired. You can't fire me. Mitchell gathered his briefcase. Effective immediately. My resignation letter and a full report of your unethical practices will be on the board's desk within the hour. As Mitchell walked out, the room's power dynamic shifted completely. Hartwell sat alone, facing the full weight of corporate justice with no allies and nowhere to hide. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m., Marcus said, standing again. Restore Jenkins, make this right, or watch your company burn. The choice is yours, but choose carefully. This is the only offer you'll get. As the NFL executives filed out, Hartwell remained slumped in his chair, the ruins of his arrogance scattered around him like broken glass. The hunter had become the hunted, and the prey had revealed itself to be far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. Justice, it seemed, had a much longer reach than Bill Hartwell had anticipated, and its grip, once established, was absolutely unforgiving. By Thursday afternoon, the corporate earthquake that had begun in the NFL boardroom was registering aftershocks throughout the business world. Jenkins sat in Tom Richardson's office, watching the systematic dismantling of Bill Hartwell's empire unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and amazement at how quickly justice could move when properly motivated. It's over, Tom said, hanging up the phone after speaking with Patricia Wong. Hartwell capitulated completely: full reinstatement, retroactive benefits, public apology, and this is the beautiful part, he's agreed to step down as CEO effective immediately. Jenkins felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. He actually resigned. The board gave him a choice: resign with a severance package, or be terminated for cause with nothing. Apparently, David Mitchell's full disclosure yesterday afternoon was even more damaging than we thought. The board discovered a pattern of financial irregularities tied to Hartwell's vendetta campaigns, inflated legal fees to cover up wrongful termination settlements, manipulated performance reviews to justify retaliation, even potential SEC violations related to misleading partner companies about employee satisfaction metrics. The scope of Hartwell's corruption was staggering. What had begun as personal revenge against Jenkins had exposed a cancer that had been eating at the company for years. The NFL's intervention hadn't just saved Jenkins' career, it had potentially saved the company itself. Who's taking over as CEO? The board asked you to consider it, Tom said with a grin. Apparently, Marcus Sullivan made quite an impression when he explained that the NFL's continued partnership was contingent on ethical leadership. They want someone who embodies the values that attracted the NFL in the first place. Jenkins stared at him in shock. They want me to run the company. Marcus was very persuasive. He pointed out that you'd already proven your ability to deliver results while maintaining integrity, exactly what they needed to rebuild trust with partners and employees. The irony was almost poetic. The woman Hartwell had tried to destroy was now being asked to replace him, but Jenkins' first thought wasn't of triumph. It was of Sarah fighting her own battle in a treatment center across town. I need to talk to Sarah about this, Jenkins said. The timing, with her treatment schedule. Actually, Tom smiled, that was part of Marcus's pitch to the board. He told them that a CEO who prioritizes family during a health crisis demonstrates exactly the kind of character they need in leadership. They're prepared to structure the role around your family obligation. Jenkins' phone buzzed with a text from Becca. Hartwell just left the building with a security escort. His personal items were in a cardboard box. The symbolism was perfect. Within hours, news of the leadership change rippled through the industry. Jennifer Walsh's article in Sports Business Journal had broken the story that morning, detailing the NFL's intervention and Hartwell's pattern of retaliation against high-performing employees. The piece had sparked immediate reactions from other major sports organizations and corporate partners. The Olympic Committee issued a statement this afternoon, Tom reported, reading from his laptop. They're reviewing their partnership with the company, but expressed confidence in the new leadership direction. Coca-Cola released a similar statement. It's like they were all waiting for someone to take the first shot at Hartwell. The vindication was sweet, but Jenkins found herself thinking about the other victims of Hartwell's regime: Richard Martinez, Amanda Foster, Thomas Kim, and others whose careers had been damaged by one man's insecurity. Justice for Jenkins was meaningful, but justice for all of them would be transformative. I want to reach out to the people Hartwell forced out, Jenkins told Tom, see if any of them want to come back. We need to rebuild this company's culture from the ground up. That evening, Jenkins sat beside Sarah's treatment chair as her second chemotherapy session dripped slowly through her IV. The cancer center was quiet, filled with the soft beeping of machines and the murmured conversations of families facing their own battle. Sarah looked tired but alert, her eyes bright with interest as Jenkins explained the day's developments. So you're going to be CEO of the company that tried to destroy us? Sarah asked, a small smile playing at her lips. If you think I should take, the board meeting is tomorrow, but I won't accept without your support. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching the IV drip. Do you remember what you told me when we first got married, about wanting to build something that mattered?
I remember. This is your chance. Not just to succeed, but to create the kind of workplace where excellence is rewarded instead of punished, where people don't have to choose between loyalty and integrity. Jenkins squeezed her hand. It means long hours, especially at first. And with your treatment, Jenkins. Her voice was firm despite her fatigue. I didn't fall in love with you because you chose the easy path. I fell in love with you because you do what's right, even when it's hard. This is right. The next morning, Jenkins walked into the Hartwell Sports Marketing boardroom as the incoming CEO, facing a collection of board members who looked simultaneously relieved and apprehensive. The company's reputation was in tatters, employee morale was at an all-time low, and several major clients were reconsidering their relationships. Ladies and gentlemen, Jenkins began, standing at the head of the conference table where Hartwell had once held court. We have a choice. We can spend our energy trying to rebuild what was, or we can use this crisis as an opportunity to build something better. Board Chairman Robert Hayes, a silver-haired veteran of corporate turnarounds, leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing?
Complete cultural transformation. We're going to become the company that other organizations point to when they talk about doing business the right way. Transparent promotion processes, employee advocacy programs, zero tolerance for retaliation, and profit sharing that rewards the people who actually deliver results. That sounds expensive, board member Patricia Knowles observed. So does losing billion-dollar contracts because your CEO can't handle talented employees, Jenkins replied. The NFL didn't threaten to terminate our partnership because they disliked our quarterly report. They were prepared to walk away because our leadership demonstrated values incompatible with their brand. The room fell silent as the board members absorbed the implication. Their biggest contract and likely future opportunities depended on maintaining ethical standards that Hartwell had systematically violated. What about the employees Hartwell forced out? Hayes asked. I want to bring back everyone who's interested and qualified. Richard Martinez is now running corporate development at our biggest competitor, but I spoke with him yesterday. He's interested in returning if we can offer the kind of environment where innovation is celebrated instead of punished. Over the next 2 hours, Jenkins outlined her vision for the company's transformation: employee counselors to mediate disputes, regular culture audits by independent firms, leadership training focused on developing talent rather than controlling it. Most importantly, a formal partnership with the NFL to develop ethical business standards that could be shared across the industry. The NFL wants to use our turnaround as a case study, Jenkins explained. They're offering additional marketing partnerships to companies that can demonstrate genuine commitment to ethical practices. We can be the first. By afternoon, the board had unanimously approved Jenkins' appointment and her restructuring plan. The announcement went out company-wide at 4 p.m., followed immediately by an all-hands meeting in the main conference room. Jenkins looked out at faces filled with curiosity, hope, and lingering uncertainty. Many of these people had watched talented colleagues disappear under Hartwell's regime. They'd learned to keep their heads down, avoid standing out, and never challenge authority. Rebuilding their trust would take time. I know some of you are wondering if this is real change, or just new management with the same problems, Jenkins began. I understand that skepticism. You've seen good people punished for excellence, and you've learned that success can be dangerous in this company. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jenkins saw Becca in the front row, tears in her eyes, and several employees nodding in recognition. That ends today. We're going to build a company where your best work is celebrated, not criticized, where loyalty flows both ways, where you don't have to choose between career advancement and personal integrity. She paused, thinking of Sarah receiving treatment across town, fighting her own battle with characteristic grace and determination. Some of you know that my wife is battling cancer. 2 weeks ago, my former boss tried to use that as leverage against me, stripping away our health insurance at the moment we needed it most. He thought my vulnerability would make me compliant. The room was dead silent now, everyone understanding the personal stakes behind the corporate drama they'd witnessed. He was wrong about that, just like he was wrong about all of you. Vulnerability doesn't make us weak, it makes us human. And building a business based on authentic human relationships, rather than fear and manipulation, isn't just more ethical, it's more profitable. The applause started slowly, then built to something approaching a standing ovation. Jenkins saw people wiping away tears, others hugging colleagues, and throughout the room, the unmistakable energy of hope being rekindled. After the meeting, Becca approached her with a thick folder, the complete files on everyone Hartwell forced out, she said. Phone numbers, LinkedIn profiles, current positions. I thought you might want to start making calls. Jenkins smiled, looking at the documentation of lives disrupted by one man's insecurity. We're going to make this right, all of it. I know, Becca said. That's why this is going to work. As Jenkins settled into the CEO office that evening, Hartwell's nameplate already replaced, she realized that the man who'd tried to destroy her had inadvertently given her the greatest gift of her career. The opportunity to build something that truly mattered. The contract that had started this whole nightmare was just the beginning. The real work of transformation was about to begin, and for the first time since Sarah's diagnosis, Jenkins felt like they were building towards something beautiful instead of just surviving something terrible. Justice had been served, But redemption, that was something they'd have to earn every day. 6 months later, Jenkins stood in the same conference room where Bill Hartwell had once held court. But the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Sunlight streamed through windows that had been cleaned for the first time in years, and the mahogany table was surrounded by faces that reflected hope rather than fear. The quarterly all-hands meeting had become a celebration of transformation rather than a dreaded corporate obligation. Our client satisfaction scores have reached an all-time high, Becca announced, her promotion to Senior Vice President of Operations evident in her confidence and poise. We've retained 98% of our existing partnerships and added 14 new clients in the past quarter alone. The applause was genuine, not the forced enthusiasm that had characterized meetings under Hartwell's regime. Jenkins looked around the room at faces she'd fought to bring back. Richard Martinez had returned as Chief Innovation Officer, Amanda Foster was rebuilding the marketing department with fresh energy, and Thomas Kim was leading a new client advocacy program that had become an industry model. The NFL partnership has exceeded all projections, Marcus Sullivan reported via video conference from the league headquarters. His presence at their quarterly meetings had become a symbol of the authentic relationships that now drove the company's success. More importantly, the ethical business standards we've developed together are being adopted by other sports organizations. The Olympic Committee has officially endorsed our workplace culture model. Jenkins felt a familiar surge of pride, but it was different now, deeper and more sustainable than the individual achievement that had started this journey. This wasn't about her success, it was about creating something that lifted everyone. "Sarah's here today," Jenkins announced, and the room erupted in applause as her wife appeared in the doorway. She moved carefully, still managing the side effects of her treatment, but her smile was radiant. Her hair was growing back, shorter and curlier than before, and she wore it like a badge of courage. "I wanted to thank all of you," Sarah said, accepting the microphone with steady hands. 6 months ago, when Jenkins was facing the darkest moment of her career, you became her family. Becca risked her job to document the truth. Tom provided legal expertise without expecting payment. Marcus and the NFL team fought for justice when they could have simply walked away. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "But more than that, you've proven that businesses can be built on love instead of fear. Every day, Jenkins comes home and tells me about someone who's thriving here, someone who's been promoted based on merit, someone who feels safe to innovate and take risks." Jenkins watched tears form in several eyes around the room. The transformation hadn't been easy. Months of difficult conversations, policy changes, and the gradual rebuilding of trust that Hartwell had systematically destroyed. But Sarah's words captured something essential about what they'd accomplished. "The doctors tell me I'm responding well to treatment," Sarah continued. "The latest scans show significant tumor reduction, and my prognosis continues to improve. But I've learned that healing isn't just about medicine, it's about being surrounded by people who believe in your strength and support your fight." The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. Jenkins found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here, the terror of Sarah's diagnosis, the betrayal of Hartwell's retaliation, the desperate phone call to Marcus, and the systematic dismantling of corruption that had followed. Each crisis had revealed unexpected allies and hidden reserves of strength. After the meeting, Jenkins and Sarah walked through the office together, stopping to chat with employees who had become genuine friends. The sterile corporate environment Hartwell had maintained was gone, replaced by collaborative spaces, employee recognition boards, and photos celebrating both professional achievements and personal milestones. "Remember when you worried about taking the CEO position?" Sarah asked as they paused beside the innovation lab where Richard Martinez was leading a brainstorming session. "You thought it might be too much with my treatment schedule." Jenkins smiled, watching her former colleague engage a team of young marketers in developing new partnership model. "You convinced me that doing the right thing is never too much work, and you've proven that authentic leadership multiplies impact instead of demanding sacrifice." That evening, they attended the company's first annual Ethics Awards dinner, an event Jenkins had instituted to celebrate employees who demonstrated integrity, innovation, and mutual support. The venue was the same hotel where Hartwell had once held intimidating holiday parties designed to reinforce hierarchy, rather than build community. Tom Richardson, now serving as the company's general counsel, approached them with a champagne glass raised in tow. "Did you see the Harvard Business Review article? They're calling your turnaround the Robinson model for transforming toxic corporate cultures." "It's not my model," Jenkins replied. "Every person in this room contributed to building something none of us could have created alone." "That's exactly why it works," Tom said. "Hartwell's biggest mistake wasn't targeting you. It was underestimating the power of people who genuinely care about each other." The evening's keynote speaker was Jennifer Walsh, the journalist whose initial investigation had helped expose Hartwell's pattern of retaliation. Her article series on corporate transformation had won several journalism awards and sparked industry-wide conversations about employee treatment. "6 months ago, I received a tip about unusual personnel changes at a sports marketing firm," she told the assembled crowd. "What I discovered was a story about the price of excellence in toxic environments and the power of authentic relationships to overcome institutional corruption." She paused, looking directly at Jenkins and Sarah. "But the real story isn't about one company's transformation. It's about proof that businesses can be both profitable and ethical, that leadership can be both strong and compassionate, and that justice, while sometimes delayed, is never defeated when good people decide to fight for." During the awards presentation, Jenkins watched as employees who had once lived in fear of recognition now stepped forward to accept praise for their contribution. The culture of fear Hartwell had cultivated had been replaced by something revolutionary: the understanding that everyone's success contributed to collective prosperity. Becca won the Innovation Award for developing the employee advocacy program that had become a model for other companies. In her acceptance speech, she looked directly at Jenkins with tears in her eyes. "6 months ago, I was just an assistant who was tired of watching good people get destroyed by petty leadership. Today, I'm leading initiatives that are being studied by business schools." Her voice strengthened. "But the real transformation isn't in our titles or our profits. It's in the knowledge that we don't have to choose between professional success and personal integrity." Later, as the evening wound down, Marcus Sullivan called with news that sent ripples of excitement through the celebration. "The NFL wants to expand our partnership beyond marketing into organizational development consulting. We want you to help other companies implement the ethical business standards you've developed." Jenkins looked at Sarah, who nodded with the same wisdom that had guided every major decision in their journey. "We're interested, but with one condition: this has to be about genuine transformation, not just consulting revenue." "That's exactly why we want to work with you," Marcus replied. "Authenticity can't be faked, and what you've built there is the real thing." As they drove home through the city lights, Sarah reached over and took Jenkins's hand. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if Hartwell hadn't tried to destroy you?" Jenkins considered the question as they passed the hospital where Sarah had received her treatments, the law office where Tom had helped build their case, and the NFL headquarters where Marcus had first decided to fight for justice. "I think about it sometimes," she said finally, "but then I realize that his betrayal revealed something more valuable than anything he could have given us: the knowledge that we're surrounded by people who will fight for what's right, even when it's difficult, and that excellence isn't something to be feared or punished." Sarah added, "It's something to be celebrated and shared." Their home had become a gathering place for the extended family of colleagues and friends who had emerged from the crisis. Tonight, like most evenings, there would be dinner guests. Perhaps Richard sharing stories about his new innovation projects, or Becca updating them on the latest workplace culture initiatives, or Tom describing his pro bono work helping other employees facing retaliation. As they pulled into their driveway, Jenkins realized that Hartwell's greatest failure hadn't been his cruelty or his corruption. It had been his inability to understand that true power comes from building others up rather than tearing them down. The $9 billion contract that had started this entire journey was just a number on a balance sheet. The relationships, the transformed lives, and the proof that businesses could operate with both profit and principle, those were the real treasures that had emerged from the wreckage of one man's petty revenge. The new beginning they'd built wasn't just about recovering from crisis, it was about creating something so fundamentally different that the old toxic patterns could never take root again. And in 6 months of watching fear transform into trust, competition transform into collaboration, and survival transform into genuine prosperity. Jenkins had learned the most important lesson of her career: authenticity wasn't just a business strategy, it was the foundation of every meaningful human achievement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that ethical leadership could thrive in competitive markets. But tonight, surrounded by the family of choice that had emerged from their darkest hour, Jenkins and Sarah had everything they needed to face whatever came next. The price of the contract had been higher than either of them could have imagined, but the value of what they'd built in return was beyond measure. Justice, it seemed, had a much longer reach than Bill Hartwell had anticipated, and its grip, once established, was absolutely unforgiving. By Thursday afternoon, the corporate earthquake that had begun in the NFL boardroom was registering aftershocks throughout the business world. Jenkins sat in Tom Richardson's office, watching the systematic dismantling of Bill Hartwell's empire unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and amazement at how quickly justice could move when properly motivated. "It's over," Tom said, hanging up the phone after speaking with Patricia Wong. Hartwell capitulated completely: full reinstatement, retroactive benefits, public apology, and this is the beautiful part, he's agreed to step down as CEO, effective immediately. Jenkins felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. He actually resigned? The board gave him a choice: resign with a severance package, or be terminated for cause with nothing. Apparently, David Mitchell's full disclosure yesterday afternoon was even more damaging than we thought. The board discovered a pattern of financial irregularities tied to Hartwell's vendetta campaigns, inflated legal fees to cover up wrongful termination settlements, manipulated performance reviews to justify retaliation, even potential SEC violations related to misleading partner companies about employee satisfaction metrics. The scope of Hartwell's corruption was staggering. What had begun as personal revenge against Jenkins had exposed a cancer that had been eating at the company for years. The NFL's intervention hadn't just saved Jenkins' career, it had potentially saved the company itself. "Who's taking over as CEO?" "The board asked you to consider it," Tom said with a grin. Apparently, Marcus Sullivan made quite an impression when he explained that the NFL's continued partnership was contingent on ethical leadership. "They want someone who embodies the values that attracted the NFL in the first place." Jenkins stared at him in shock. "They want me to run the company." Marcus was very persuasive. He pointed out that you'd already proven your ability to deliver results while maintaining integrity, exactly what they needed to rebuild trust with partners and employees. The irony was almost poetic. The man Hartwell had tried to destroy was now being asked to replace him, but Jenkins' first thought wasn't of triumph, it was of Sarah, fighting her own battle in a treatment center across town. "I need to talk to Sarah about this," Jenkins said. "The timing, with her treatment schedule." Actually, Tom smiled, that was part of Marcus's pitch to the board. He told them that a CEO who prioritizes family during a health crisis demonstrates exactly the kind of character they need in leadership. They're prepared to structure the role around your family obligation. Jenkins' phone buzzed with a text from Becca. Hartwell just left the building with a security escort. His personal items were in a cardboard box. The symbolism was perfect. Within hours, news of the leadership change rippled through the industry. Jennifer Walsh's article in Sports Business Journal had broken the story that morning, detailing the NFL's intervention and Hartwell's pattern of retaliation against high-performing employees. The piece had sparked immediate reactions from other major sports organizations and corporate partners. The Olympic Committee issued a statement this afternoon, Tom reported, reading from his laptop. They're reviewing their partnership with the company, but expressed confidence in the new leadership direction. Coca-Cola released a similar statement. It's like they were all waiting for someone to take the first shot at Hartwell. The vindication was sweet, but Jenkins found himself thinking about the other victims of Hartwell's regime: Richard Martinez, Amanda Foster, Thomas Kim, and others, whose careers had been damaged by one man's insecurity. Justice for Jenkins was meaningful, but justice for all of them would be transformative. "I want to reach out to the people Hartwell forced out," Jenkins told Tom, "see if any of them want to come back. We need to rebuild this company's culture from the ground up." That evening, Jenkins sat beside Sarah's treatment chair as her second chemotherapy session dripped slowly through her IV. The cancer center was quiet, filled with the soft beeping of machines and the murmured conversations of families facing their own battle. Sarah looked tired but alert, her eyes bright with interest, as Jenkins explained the day's developments. "So you're going to be CEO of the company that tried to destroy us?" she asked, a small smile playing at her lips. "If you think I should take it, the board meeting is tomorrow, but I won't accept without your support." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching the IV drip. "Do you remember what you told me when we first got married, about wanting to build something that mattered?" "I remember. This is your chance, not just to succeed, but to create the kind of workplace where excellence is rewarded instead of punished, where people don't have to choose between loyalty and integrity." Jenkins squeezed her hand. "It means long hours, especially at first, and with your treatment, Jenkins." Her voice was firm despite her fatigue. "I didn't fall in love with you because you chose the easy path. I fell in love with you because you do what's right, even when it's hard. This is right." The next morning, Jenkins walked into the Hartwell Sports Marketing boardroom as the incoming CEO, facing a collection of board members who looked simultaneously relieved and apprehensive. The company's reputation was in tatters, employee morale was at an all-time low, and several major clients were reconsidering their relationships. "Gentlemen, ladies," Jenkins began, standing at the head of the conference table where Hartwell had once held court. "We have a choice. We can spend our energy trying to rebuild what was, or we can use this crisis as an opportunity to build something better." Board Chairman Robert Hayes, a silver-haired veteran of corporate turnarounds, leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Complete cultural transformation. We're going to become the company that other organizations point to when they talk about doing business the right way. Transparent promotion processes, employee advocacy programs, zero tolerance for retaliation, and profit sharing that rewards the people who actually deliver results." "That sounds expensive," board member Patricia Knowles observed. "So does losing billion-dollar contracts because your CEO can't handle talented employees," Jenkins replied. "The NFL didn't threaten to terminate our partnership because they disliked our quarterly report. They were prepared to walk away because our leadership demonstrated values incompatible with their brand." The room fell silent as the board members absorbed the implication. Their biggest contract and likely future opportunities depended on maintaining ethical standards that Hartwell had systematically violated. "What about the employees Hartwell forced out?" Hayes asked. "I want to bring back everyone who's interested and qualified." "Richard Martinez is now running corporate development at our biggest competitor, but I spoke with him yesterday. He's interested in returning if we can offer the kind of environment where innovation is celebrated instead of punished." Over the next 2 hours, Jenkins outlined his vision for the company's transformation: employee counselors to mediate disputes, regular culture audits by independent firms, leadership training focused on developing talent rather than controlling it. Most importantly, a formal partnership with the NFL to develop ethical business standards that could be shared across the industry. "The NFL wants to use our turnaround as a case study," Jenkins explained. "They're offering additional marketing partnerships to companies that can demonstrate genuine commitment to ethical practices. We can be the first." By afternoon, the board had unanimously approved Jenkins' appointment and his restructuring plan. The announcement went out company-wide at 4 p.m., followed immediately by an all-hands meeting in the main conference room. Jenkins looked out at faces filled with curiosity, hope and lingering uncertainty. Many of these people had watched talented colleagues disappear under Hartwell's regime. They'd learned to keep their heads down, avoid standing out, and never challenge authority. Rebuilding their trust would take time. "I know some of you are wondering if this is real change or just new management with the same problems," Jenkins began. "I understand that skepticism. You've seen good people punished for excellence, and you've learned that success can be dangerous in this company." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jenkins saw Becca in the front row, tears in her eyes, and several employees nodding in recognition. That ends today. We're going to build a company where your best work is celebrated, not criticized, where loyalty flows both ways, where you don't have to choose between career advancement and personal integrity." He paused, thinking of Sarah receiving treatment across town, fighting her own battle with characteristic grace and determination. "Some of you know that my wife is battling cancer. 2 weeks ago, my former boss tried to use that as leverage against me, stripping away our health insurance at the moment we needed it most. He thought my vulnerability would make me compliant." The room was dead silent now, everyone understanding the personal stakes behind the corporate drama they'd witnessed. "He was wrong about that, just like he was wrong about all of you. Vulnerability doesn't make us weak, it makes us human. And building a business based on authentic human relationships, rather than fear and manipulation, isn't just more ethical, it's more profitable." The applause started slowly, then built to something approaching a standing ovation. Jenkins saw people wiping away tears, others hugging colleagues, and throughout the room, the unmistakable energy of hope being rekindled. After the meeting, Becca approached him with a thick folder, the complete files on everyone Hartwell forced out. She said, "Phone numbers, LinkedIn profiles, current positions. I thought you might want to start making calls." Jenkins smiled, looking at the documentation of lives disrupted by one man's insecurity. "We're going to make this right, all of it." "I know," Becca said, "that's why this is going to work." As Jenkins settled into the CEO office that evening, Hartwell's nameplate already replaced, he realized that the man who'd tried to destroy him had inadvertently given him the greatest gift of his career, the opportunity to build something that truly mattered. The contract that had started this whole nightmare was just the beginning. The real work of transformation was about to begin, and for the first time since Sarah's diagnosis, Jenkins felt like they were building towards something beautiful, instead of just surviving something terrible. Justice had been served, but redemption, that was something they'd have to earn every day. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.